It's such an honor to be here and to share with you this morning. That as I think about the topic that we're working with this week, the idea of faith, I'm reminded of the powerful work done by Charles Fillmore in one of his books called The 12 Powers of Man. Anyone familiar with that? Faith is the first that he calls out in his book, and it is a powerful place to begin this process and this awareness. Yet faith is something that is often misunderstood. In the scripture we just heard, we heard the word belief, and faith and belief are often kind of interchanged in a way that leaves us uncertain about just how to work with it, what it is, and how to take advantage of the value that it offers to us. So let's spend a little time with that first. Let's think about both faith and belief. That in the scripture said, when you pray, believe that you've already received it. Now, that may seem like a difficult thing to do, because usually when we are in a time of prayer, and usually when we are seeking out prayer, we're very much aware of the lack that is in our situation. Whether it's a lack of health, whether it's a lack of finances, whatever it is that moves us to prayer, most often it is because we're experiencing lack. But not always, because there are many times that we'll go into prayer in a sense of joyous celebration of who we are, or of what is going on in our experience. The idea of being willing to acknowledge, to begin with, as you're in the process, that it is already yours, is taking it outside of the linear form of the human experience and moving into that transcendent form of the spiritual experience. We know in spirit that time does not exist. And our new science feels that, this is one of the most exciting times in life, because what we're seeing is science and spirituality beginning to talk the same language. And I can remember in my career early on that it was almost a battle whenever you would sit down and try to talk about spiritual things with someone who came from a scientific point of view. Because if you can't see it and if you can't measure it, it isn't real. And from the idea of spirit, it's just the other way around. That it isn't real until you feel it, and then you can see it. So the idea of working with the whole realm of the unseen, the unknown, is what spirit is about. Quantum physics these days is all about that. It's all about realizing the connection between what we don't see, what we don't have in our physical awareness, and how that impacts everything else. So we are on the threshold of some of the most powerful movements in terms of the awareness and consciousness in the planet. That I've been involved with Unity and teaching these spiritual principles literally all of my life. And I can say that without question, this is the most exciting time that I've been alive. Next month, I will celebrate my 72nd trip around the sun. And in that process, I am more excited today about what is happening in our life and in our world than I have been over all the rest of the time. I grew up, as many of you did, through the time that we were destined to destroy ourselves. Do you remember all of those messages? How it was certain that it was going to happen? Well, guess what? It hasn't happened. And those who look into and understand the far reaches of the consciousness, marked 2011 and the succession of the sequinox, when that cycle ended, was the middle point of a huge shift. A change. It's like turning a great ship. It's taking many years, and that was a center point. The understanding which was brought forth in the coming up on the 2012, the idea of the Mayan calendar and how that time was going to end. Did you notice it ended? Actually, it did. It ended in the way we understood it. The ancient history that goes way back, far beyond anything that has been written, that has been carried forth in the mystical traditions, says that if we could manage not to destroy ourselves by the time of 2012, that it would all begin to turn and change. And that's exactly what's happened. Now, we look at what's going on in our world right now and we think, oh my gosh. We look at what's happening in our politics. We look at what's happening around the world, and we look at everything and say, how could things be in a worse mess than they are right now? Any of you ever think about, hold that thought? Well, I'd invite you to look at that differently. To have the faith that the creator of this planet, of which you and I are so connected that there's no way that we can be separated, didn't put us here to destroy us. We understand that God is a loving God. Now, I'm sure most all of you are parents, or certainly at least children. And if you have been a parent, or if you are a parent, there's no way that you would bring a child into life and then destroy them, just because you could. Now, from their point of view growing up, maybe they think that, yeah, that's what you're about. But that's not really where you're coming from. Any more than the creator of the universe is creating for us a place in which bringing us into existence to be destroyed. So as we're stepping into this next cycle of the flow, what I see as I look at it is a wonderful experience beginning to unfold. What's happening is we have in the midst of us now a wild card. You know what wild cards are? A wild card is something or someone or some stimulus that was totally unexpected. And it stirs everything up. It's a catalyst. So what we're in the middle of right now is everything that is in our experience being stirred up everywhere we look. Now, how does that feel to you? Are we jumping up and down and saying, yay, yay, yay? No, we're more likely saying, I don't know. Again, the Creator, God that is within each of us and within everything else, understands where we are and is moving through this process. And so it's up to us then to exercise faith that the process is working. That sometimes takes courage. Sometimes it takes a great deal of courage. When our senses give us information that says it's going one way or it's happening one way, but yet we know in our heart that there's another story. One of the things that we'll be talking about this afternoon as we explore HeartMath is the role of how we bring in information through our senses and how that impacts our thinking and our feeling and ultimately our choices. And so much of our choices are driven by our past experiences. It's kind of like we have a subconscious machine that takes in information, processes it, and then values or evaluates how we should take our next step based on what we've done in the past. Isn't that pretty much a process that you use? You look at what's worked in the past. Here I've got this situation. What's worked in the past? And you kind of look for something that fits it as best as it can, and then you take from that past history and put it into this new situation and hope that it works. Sometimes it does, but a lot of times it doesn't work out the way we would really want it to. So the understanding is that as we exercise our spiritual faculty of faith, and that I'll be talking a lot more about here in just a moment. We draw on that creative energy of life within us, within the universe, and are able to bring that into bear to the situation. It comes in through our intuitive function. But when we're so engaged with the images of what things is, and we look at it and say, well, in the past it's always meant when this happens that that's going to happen. When we operate from that place, then we find ourselves stuck in that wheel of remembrance. So I want you to think about this spiritual faculty of faith and understand a little more about what it is. If we look in the Standard Dictionary, it tells us that faith is belief based on our senses. Is that your experience of faith? No. Excuse me. Faith, as described in the works of Charles Fillmore, and I think a very deep and spiritual way, is our ability to say yes. Now, I'm using the phrasing ability that Charles, in his initial writing, talked about them as spiritual powers. And that is one way of looking at them. But I've found over the years that a more powerful way of looking at them, really, is to think about them as abilities. That when you think about it as a power, then that tends to put it outside of yourself, and you have to draw this power in. But when you think about it as an ability, then that's something you possess. That's something you have. So as you think about these, and as you go through, it's my understanding that you're going to be working with one of these spiritual faculties each month. Is that correct? Yeah. As you go through the rest of this process, as you begin to think of them more as abilities and less as powers, then that brings them more within your grasp. Because if it's a power that you're looking for, your first question is, well, where do I go get this power? How do I get it? But when you understand it's an ability, it's an innate, it's a God-given ability that is already within you, well, then at least you know where to begin to look for it. It's not going to be found in a book. It's not going to be found in a guru. It's not going to be found on a street corner. It's within you. So as you begin to then refocus your energy and your attention on where you look, into the fact that already within you is this perhaps seed of the awareness that will allow you to move into whatever it is you need. As you're facing whatever's going on in your experience, having faith that God is at work in the situation is the most powerful antidote to all of the fear and the stress that you experience in that process. So how do you want to live your life? Do you want to live your life based on the circling and circling of all of the old thoughts, kind of the idea of it worked before, so we'll rinse it and reuse it? You know, it's not going to lead us through the times that we're in. Now, our planet has gone through many cycles like we're going through right now. We're standing here thinking, oh, we've never gone through anything like this before. Oh, yes, we have. Time and time again. Depending on how far back you are able to look into the history of the planet, you'll see cycles where this has happened, where it's happened, and where it's happened. And in case you hadn't noticed, life survived on the planet. It's going to survive now. Is it going to change? Very probably. And actually, I hope so. I hope it changes a lot. But what's going to drive that change? Is it going to be the fear of what is happening or what needs to happen, or is it going to be something else? The ancients talked about this time of the shift in the 2012 and talking about moving from a time of fear and greed as the driving forces of all that came into experience and into manifestation, to the shift of it being instead compassion and benevolence. So we're moving from a time of greed and fear driving everything in our experience to instead compassion and benevolence. Now there's another parallel here, and it's important to see this and to factor this into your thinking. Greed and that sense of power is pretty much a masculine kind of thing. And I'm not bashing men, hey, because I've got a male body right now. So it's important for me to, to be responsive to that. So I'm not bashing men, but I am understanding a role of the energy that works in my system that is different than the role of the energy that works in the feminine system. We're moving from a time of strong masculine domination to a strong feminine domination. It may not look like it right now with all that's been going on, but then you see the seeds of it. You see the seeds of it. So what I'm saying to you is that we're moving from a harder time where things are drawn in solid, harsh lines to a time in which things are drawn with an understanding of compassion and benevolence, an open heart. Now, Unity has brought this message to the planet ever since its beginning. As all of you, or many of you, I'm sure know, that it was Myrtle Fillmore and her experience of a healing, of being able to touch in so completely to that divine presence that her body was transformed in a situation which was thought to be terminal. So it was through her understanding. And as I'm sure you also know, that the leadership of Unity Ministries, in its beginning, for many of its years, was all led by women. Now, part of that was because in that early time, that women had the ability to stay home and didn't have to go out into the workforce and be part of the generating of the kind of income that the family needed. So they had time to spend on it. But more importantly, much more importantly, they had the innate ability to connect to the intuitive nature that it taught. So in some of the ancient times, our society and our relationship between men and women was greatly different. Women had a certain role in terms of the connection with the spirituality. For after all, it is the women who bring forth new life. Men have an important part to play in that, and they do. But as much as we might want to, none of us can take credit for giving birth. None of us as men can really understand what that process is about. Oh, we can technically understand it, but on a feeling level, we just can't go there. And so there's a time in which we need to be willing to take our new roles and to see ourselves in a different light and allow ourselves to move into that process, a process of relating to and understanding that things are different now, and they're going to be different. And it doesn't mean they're worse. As things change, we need to understand that change and allow ourselves to flow with it. So the rest of the statement about faith, in the title that I gave you kind of a tease, faith is the ability to say yes to ... So the question then I have to you is, what fills in that ... What comes after that? What is it you say yes to in faith? Do you say yes to the fears that you have about what's going on? Many of us do. Many of us look at what's going on in our life, in our careers, and we feel the fear about it, and we say yes to that. We accept it. We allow it to be there, and we allow that to have a predominant role in our thoughts and our feelings about what's going on. So we're quick to shake our head and say, oh no, we don't do that. But take a good close look and you'll see, yeah, there have been times. There have been times when we've said yes to the things that are going on in our life that really hadn't ought to be there. Often that's because we've come to the conclusion that there's no other option. We don't have anything else we can do. And that's where faith really comes in such a powerful way, in that it provides you with another option. Now, I'm going to go ahead and take my coat off if you don't mind. Now, usually in the churches, the old, whoops, there we go. I thought I might do that. Usually, thank you. Usually in the church in the old days, you'll have little sound effects here. When the preacher took his coat off, you know you were in for trouble. Thank you. You know, things are going to heat up. Well, in a way, that's true. They are. But not in the sense of the fire and brimstone that I'm not going to be laying on you that kind of message. But what I am saying to you is that you have the power. You have the ability to access the power within you that will draw from wherever you need it to be to accomplish what you need to accomplish. The rest of the statement is, it is my ability to say yes to God and good and truth. So faith is your ability to say yes to God and good and truth, particularly in the face of your senses telling you everything else. It's your ability in that moment, in that situation, in that time, to access and say yes to that. Even though your senses don't see it. Even though everything around you, everyone around you is saying, oh no, it's going this way. Faith is your ability to say yes to God and to good and to truth. So, if you're going to say yes to this, where are you saying yes to? I mean, usually you think of that kind of as a conversation, okay, that someone offers something to you and you say yes or no to it. So if you're going to respond to God, where do you respond? You send him an email? Myself. Yeah, myself. But you know, you got to think about that a little bit, because depending on how you think about yourself and who you are, that if you're thinking of yourself as a human being in search of a spiritual experience, and that's how most of us spent the last few decades, as a human being in search of a spiritual experience, then the self that we reach out to is that searcher, that one looking for that experience. But if, on the other hand, if by chance that's just reversed, that you're not a human being in search of a spiritual experience, but instead you are a spiritual being having a human experience. Do you see how that makes such a big difference in where you address this? Because if you're stuck in the human experience, then you're going to address it to the human part of you, and the human part of you is going to say, this is nonsense. But when you address it to the spiritual part of you, the divine in you, the essence in you that goes beyond time and space and form, when you address it to that, then you have a communication, you have a connection, and it flows forth into your experience in a powerful way. So I invite you to become aware of that presence. And I want to take this into a time of meditation. As we take the idea of, I'm a spiritual being, and I'm here on this planet Earth, inhabiting an incredible piece of equipment we call a human body. What we can do and what our body can do is magnificent. Often we have not given it the support that it needs, and that can change. As we solidly make the shift to realizing that I am a spiritual being, that I'm living in a spiritual universe that is governed and controlled by spiritual law, as I surrender to who I am, not who I pretend to be, not who this human form sees and connects with around this planet and wants to be like, but rather I surrender to who I am. That divine presence made manifest in human form, identified with your name. You are here at this time by no mistake. You're here as a divine appointment. For you bring with you, through you, tremendous resources to bring to bear in the form of light and love to this community, to this city, to this nation, to this planet. You are a critical, vital part of God's plan on earth. And not just you. Every two-legged is a vital part of this plan. All of the rest of creation has its part to play. But those of us that are two-legged, we have something special. We have the ability to know that God is within us. It is a truth that God is everywhere equally present. And so as we know that that presence is within us, it can never be taken away from us. We can never move beyond it. We can never lose it. And so as a spiritual being, here at this time and in this place, I have but one purpose. And that is to be of service in love to everything else. To feel a compassion for the confusion and the suffering that I see, that my senses bring to me. And offer benevolence in place. And it does not matter the gender of your body. For the divine in you has no gender. It's like the difference between a Ford and a Chevy. They both are great vehicles. They each have different ways of delivering energy. And truly, one is not better than the other. So as you as a spiritual being are here in a male body or a female body, you have important, critically important work to do at this time. In fact, that is why you are here. Because you have the capacity to do this work. So faith is your ability to say yes to God, to the good that you see in life, and the truth that lives in your heart. And my friends, this is the way it truly is.